Hello, my name is Osha. Today is May the 6th, 2026. According to Gun Violence Archives, there have been at least 4,298 uh, deaths from gun violence as of today. And of those 4,298 deaths, 284 of them have been teens. 76 of them have been children under the age of 11. Now, apart from those deaths, there have been 7,500 gun injuries due to gun violence and uh, 137 mass shootings. So, um, despite all of that, of course, America is still the most powerful nation in the world. And we are fighting a war. There's an ongoing war, at least one war with Iran, despite the ceasefire. Um, I like talking about American presidents, and uh, I like talking about American history. Uh, and of course, I've done previous videos in which I've discussed the U.S. Constitution. And what I want to do right now is see if take some kind of litmus test, see if um, we're achieving our goals according to the design of the founding fathers. And let me refer us to the preamble of the Constitution. So I'm going to just quickly read from the preamble of the Constitution. So the preamble says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America." Right. So you see, domestic tranquility, establish justice, where there are extrajudicial killings, these deaths due to gun violence, right? They're not because a court ordered that convicted Americans should be killed by firing squad. No, these are extrajudicial killings, right? These are crimes. Over 4,298 people have been killed in America, and it's just May 6th, 2026. Um, 7,500 have been injured. That's apart from the gun, the deaths. Um, Interestingly, uh, why is gun violence so rampant in America? Of course, people will allude to the Second Amendment, which is in our Constitution, which gives Americans the rights to bear arms. Now, I've done a video in which I've mentioned that, well, the Second Amendment is sort of dated, right? The reason the founding fathers, right, inserted the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights, the right to bear arms, was because we didn't have a standing army in 1791. We didn't have a standing army in 1791. The author of the Second Amendment, James Madison, of course, was against having a standing army. So this was the substitute to having a standing army, right? The right to bear arms, to raise a militia, to be able to raise a militia, because there were other realities, right, in the American terrain at that time. There was slavery at the time. So the founding fathers, the slave owner like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, they they were at risk of slave insurrections, slave uprisings, right? So they needed to be able to bear arms, right, to suppress slave insurrections. Additionally, they were living amongst Native Americans, whom they called pejoratively as Indians back then, right? Uh, whom whose lands they were constantly at war with Native Americans to take possession of their lands, right? This went on, of course, the dreadful Trail of Tears, in which Native Americans were dispossessed of their lands. So there were other realities at the time, right? Because if they seized lands of Native Americans, there were other people who would fight back, right? Who would fight back against the Americans, right? And so there was a need to be able to bear arms for self-defense at the time because of the realities that existed. But this has changed. Today, we not only have a standing army, we have the strongest military force, the strongest military in the world, right? By far. Our military budgets outsizes, it surpasses the military budget of the next 7 to 8 or so nations combined, right? So we have a very strong standing army today. Today, we are no longer just uh, on a strip on the Atlantic. Now we occupy the stretch of the continent, right? The continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the East Coast to the West Coast, right? So we don't have we don't have to fear a foreign invasion, right, from our neighbors, right? So our realities are different. In any event, something that I wanted to do also was refer us to what the 45th and 47th president, who's just less than a month ago, just last month, April 25th, survived a failed assassination attempt, another a failed assassination attempt. We recall while he was on the campaign trail, he was actually shot at, right? And they got a nip of his earlobe. Thomas Crooks, a 20-year-old boy who's, it's unfortunate, he was highly academically intelligent, right? He had high academic intelligence. He had a SAT score of what, 1563 out of 1600. He had just been admitted to university. He could have gone to an Ivy League if he wanted. His life was full of promise. Instead, for some reason, he goes to shoot at the president. They say he was bullied as a kid. Now, the most recent failed assassin, the first Black American to shoot, to attempt to take the life of an American president, Cole Thomas Allen. He was highly intelligent as well, um, a graduate of Caltech, the famous Caltech. Caltech is harder to get into than MIT. Was a mechanical engineer. He had a master's in computer science, trying to kill the president. These two, failed assassins had something in common. None of them had a criminal record. None of them had a criminal record. People who knew them, all said, well, they least expected it from that they were the most unlikely would be assassins, right? They didn't see any signs in them, in their traits, right? So um, the reason I'm discussing gun violence today is because I'm trying to do an assessment of the domestic tranquility part, because I've been doing videos, and because of the recent wars, we've been focused on um, the president's foreign wars. But now, how about how we're doing back at home, right? How are we doing at home? And it's we are at a crisis. It's always been the case with regard to gun violence. Interestingly, even though those stats are atrocious, right? 4,298 people killed as of May 6th. The data actually indicates that that those numbers have declined. They've declined relative to previous years, and that's bad. Um, uh, Gun sales, right? For instance, gun sales uh, as of the first quarter, of 2026, right? Now we're into the second quarter. We're almost done with the second quarter. But as of the first quarter alone was 3.9 million, right? Compare that to first quarter of 2021. it was 5.6 million. So that's a decline, right? Not very good. So Americans like to buy guns, like to buy guns. There was a guy who once told me that he had like over 100 guns. This was someone I met while wrongfully detained, and so I used the opportunity to start to investigate, ask Americans questions to know why they're in jail, what causes them to go to jail. And, I've been finding, you find these very crazy, harebrained reasons, and you know that there's a serious mental disturbance or a lack of maturity in America, right? Very lack of maturity. Of course, 1 out of every 3 American is said to struggle with substance abuse or severe mental illness, right? So there's a huge mental health crisis in America and lack of maturity, right? We've become increasingly nihilistic. Something else that I found in the news today um, was a confirmation of President Trump's August 2025 Truth Social post, in which he said DC had fake crime numbers, that they have fake crime numbers, and they to create an illusion of safety. They try to hide the real conditions of crime in DC, and of course, he's as a result, we know that he did surge law enforcement in DC, sending in National Guard and in to patrol DC, which of course had a national pushback. But this morning, internal investigators in DC were actually validating President Trump's comments, because they suspended 13 police officers in DC because of faking crime numbers, right? Because they were manipulating crime data, right? They were manipulating crime data. So 13 police officers in DC were suspended. That's the news this morning, which is bizarre, right? Is it only manipulation of crime data that police officers do, right? I've been talking about how I was swatted by Montgomery County Police on May uh, 16, 2023, 3 years now, from in my own home. Again, I had no criminal history either. I had no criminal history, no criminal record. I was actually a holder of a top secret clearance, TSSCI, working as an auditor in the Department of the Navy, and I'd gotten a new position. I had a new position in the federal government. I had many different new offers in the federal government. Then police, 40 cops, falsely imprisoned me in my home, locked me in, had no arrest warrant. They fabricated evidence, conjured up false witnesses. They had a deranged illegal alien, criminal illegal alien, because he can't speak a word of English, right? From Ethiopia or something, maybe Ethiopia, Somalia. I don't know where he's from, but he looked Ethiopian. He assaulted me with the deranged Jide Wariri, a Howard University professor, on May 14. My friend asked me to call the police. I called the cops, but the cops now went to falsify their police report, right? They falsified their police report, possibly because they knew Jide Wariri, possibly because Jide Wariri apparently had come with a crisis team and they were outside. The crisis team, they're the police, right? They're made up of cops. They were outside my building. According to him, they told him I hadn't committed a crime, so they couldn't come in with me because I would sue. It would be a violation of the law. They knew that. But he was lying to them that I was going through a mental health crisis, right? So they had him go and fabricate an emergency evaluation petition. He didn't come with an emergency evaluation petition on that day. So after I called the police, after they assaulted me, trying to kidnap me, him and this neighbor, they suborned him to go and fabricate an emergency evaluation petition in which he lied that I threatened to shoot him. He didn't say I threatened to shoot him, but he said something about a shot. So he played a trick on him, because they told him, they suborned him to go and lie, to commit perjury. But he was cautious and he didn't say that I threatened to shoot him, but he put something about a gunshot. but not saying that I was the one who was going to shoot him. Just put it randomly, and he used that as his defense because he knew the police had suborned him to go and lie, to go and tell a lie. So then they also suborned a neighbor who, Germa Shumi, the one he had assaulted me with, to go and file a false peace order after I was in the hospital, to file an ex parte peace order. Ex parte means only one side is before a judge, the other side is not there to defend themselves, right? Which is actually illegal, part of judicial misconduct, right? So he filed an ex parte peace order, fabricating what happened. Everything he wrote was a fabrication, right? So that's the police that suborned them. So the police not only fabricates crime numbers, as President Trump said, and as they have confirmed, they verified from their, validated from their investigations in DC, but they also um, plant false evidence, they create false witnesses, they file false incident reports, and that's what I'm a victim of. It's been 3 years now. I haven't worked. I've been prevented from working. I went to university to get 5 degrees. Why did I? I didn't get 5 degrees. Do all of the, stay out of crime, stay out of trouble, get all my experience, certifications, to sit down at home doing nothing. So Montgomery County Police and the Department of the Navy, in all likelihood, have blackballed me, trying to blackmail me to accept a wrongful plea bargain to protect the rogue cops who assaulted me. This is where they shot me in the head. The stitches, permanent scarring from stitches from the taser dart that they shot into my head, right? The officer who shot me in the head said his intent was actually to use his Glock to kill me. But God saved me on that day. God protected me. So the cops are crooked, right? The cops are crooked. They do a variety of notorious things, not just manipulating crime data. It's unfortunate that this is where we are in the United States. It's there's no domestic tranquility, and something has to be done about law enforcement, the police. They have to. Congress has to pass more stringent laws, and the standards to be a cop, of course, needs to be raised. Of course, we can't. I'm not one who believes that. Well, uh, ban the police or whatever, defund the police. No, no. Crime exists in America, right? Americans compulsively they compulsively gravitate towards gratuitous crime. Today as well, this morning, the same papers I was reading, the same news I was reading, a man was sentenced, a man from Montgomery County again. They love guns. No, maybe that's why the cops come out all force and fury um, against any sniff of gun violence. Um, this 42-year-old man killed a 45-year-old man in at the Desperados Bergen bar in DC. Uh, you U Street, right? It's funny. I used to work somewhere nearby because I used to go to the Boys and Poets to eat. I worked in an office at a credit union nearby in that area, so it's horrifying to hear that there was some kind of gun violence. So these two grown men in their 40s got into a fist fight. One of them broke a bottle on the other's head, and they got into a fist fight. And the victim, the one who was attacked, was defeating. Was getting he had the upper hand, right? And so because the other one was being beat up, he pulls out a gun and shoots him several times, including in the abdomen and the stomach, and he dies. But the shooter, flees, gets on his motorbike, and flees. He escapes, and it takes a few weeks before the cops apprehend him. Now he was convicted. Was what it was in the news. His trial's over. He was convicted of second degree murder and gets about just over 30 years in jail, right? So Americans are violent. There's this bravado, and you wonder if 40, how can two 40-year-old men be in a fist fight? They weren't indigent. No, they weren't, they weren't indigents who were mentally ill. They probably, I don't know, but they were in a fight. They're adults, right? And I wonder maybe because how does a 40-year-old man get into a fist fight in public? It's something that's not beyond Americans. And what's funny is if you're in a fist fight in public, even anywhere, yeah, right, you'll be charged with assault. It's a crime against the state. It's assault. It's disturbance of the peace. But they do it anyway. And as I was reading that, it was just so bizarre because um, in Nigeria we don't have the civilian populace doesn't have access to guns, right? That's banned. They don't have a right to bear arms. They don't have access to guns. But you see fighting for teens, for kids, people under 10, under 11, under 15. That's something they do. They fight, they fist fight. They don't use a knife at a fist fight. They don't, it's not to, and they get over it, right? They let off steam. It's one of those youthful exuberance things that happens to boys as they're growing up. And they learn, they smarten up, they wise up and realize that, fist fighting doesn't resolve anything, right? One person's going to lose. They're probably going to get injured. Um, Even the guy who wins, right? He realizes he doesn't have a push, that he doesn't have a doormat to walk over. He's never going to pick on that victim anymore because that person fought him back, right? That's the fighting thing, the bullying thing. Sometimes you have to stick up to a bully, right? You have to. That's something kids have to learn as they're growing up. Sometimes you have to stick up to a bully. Doesn't mean that you go about shooting them, right? And that's where you have a problem in America. Many of these kids who go into mass shootings, and I'm not a psychologist to make any sort of I'm not conclusive analysis or authoritative analysis or anything like that. Um, but many of these kids that commit these mass shootings in schools, they say they've been bullied. They're normally kids who've been bullied. Um, they say this Thomas Crooks, who shot at the president on the campaign trail, they say he was a good kid who was shy, who had been bullied, right? He was bullied. And what FBI, the criminologists, think is that it was his way to react. That was his own reaction against the bullying, right, in school, and to get some kind of attention and to react. Americans don't have this outlet for kids, right? They don't have this outlet for kids. And yes, bullying is a problem. It's pervasive in America because Americans generate these factory dysfunctional homes, right? Right. It manufactures these dysfunctional homes. Many bullies come from dysfunctional homes, right? It's because they're subjected to abuse by their fathers, or they're neglected at home. They have psychological problems. That's what causes bullying. Even in Nigeria, right? You find the kids who were bullies where they had these psychological problems, right? They came from bad homes, right? Their fathers abused them. They were looking for some kind of attention, right? But America doesn't have an outlet because America doesn't let people fight. If they let kids fight and not lock them up in jail, destroy their lives for fighting, if they in Nigeria, when kids fought, they didn't even put it on, it didn't go in your record or anything like that, in your school record. No, you fight, they just punish both of you and that's it. And you learn that, okay, it's not a good idea to fight. So you become wise. But you see, they don't do that. They don't have such outlets, mechanisms in America. That's why you have two 40-year-olds fist fighting in public at a bar. And then one gets a gun and kills the one who's has the upper hand, and he's destroyed his life. He spends he's got 33 years in jail, and he's already 42 years old, right? He's going to be in his 70s, so his life is done, right? That's America for you. And fortunately, you don't hear Nigerian Americans. Of course, I'm interested in the welfare of Nigerian Americans because I'm a Nigerian American, right? And I'm interested in how Nigerian Americans navigate uh, the terrain. I saw some negative news concerning Nigerian Americans yesterday, and it had to do with ICE picking up, illegal immigrants. There was a guy in New York, I think, last name of Okeke, that there was some kind of blowback in New York, some kind of riot or whatever, in the way ICE detained him. His papers had expired. But there was someone else again who was detained by ICE, and he was, manacled, uh, ankles and his hands, his wrists, for having committed a sexual offense, right? Uh, child, abuse of a minor, right? So that's statutory rape. So many people coming from Nigeria, they don't get it, right? Um, you can't sleep with a 16-year-old. They can create a fake ID and all that. You still get statutory rape. You're going to be registered permanently as a sex offender. You'll never be able to get a job. You'll never be able to get live in a neighborhood anymore. You know, in a regular neighborhood anymore, right? Everybody knows who you are. So it's like your objective of coming to America to get, to maybe get some kind of employment, earn money to send back home. It's gone. It's wasted. It's defeated. So don't let your hormones defeat you, right? Don't let your hormones defeat you. When you come to a new country, learn their laws. Learn their laws. They take that uh, uh, sexual child abuse very seriously. Now, these people, it's not, yeah, Nigerians don't do the crazy things that you find Americans doing. I mean, people born in America doing, like having sex with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, that kind of crazy stuff. They're having sex maybe with a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. That's still illegal. Who's probably misrepresenting themselves as an adult to them, right? They have a fake ID. They meet them. Many of them go to bars. They ran away from home or something. They meet them, and they think because they have money they can lure them. This is something Nigerians have to be very careful of. It's going to destroy your life. There was a story of a Nigerian I read of. He had a great job. He had a good job, and he had sex with a minor. He had sex with a minor. That's statutory rape. He was arrested. He committed suicide. Right? While in prison, he committed suicide. Before, I think even before his conviction. Before his, I think he had already been convicted, but or something. But he did commit suicide. So Nigerians have to be very careful. In any event, I'm going to stop this video here. I'll continue and discuss other things regarding the laws, U.S. laws, being a law-abiding American citizen. This does not constitute legal advice. I do have a Juris Doctor degree from George Washington University Law School, and I did international human rights law. I did an international human rights law program at Oxford University. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.